In less than 24 hours, I got a call that one of my friends who I would like to hang out in the club with, and dance with in the club, OD.
Ooh.
So it was as if God told me that I was, I always complain about being too young to recover, but He showed me that I wasn't too young to die. And so I began to do what I had to do as long as I wasn't causing harm to myself. As long as it was, I had to become open minded. It was a new journey. Of course, it went against everything that I had ever known, but these people were living this great life. They were smiling, they were happy, they were joyous and free. And I wanted some of that.
Happy Wednesday, my winners and goal getters. Welcome back to this week's edition of the Getting the Win Show. I am your host, Mellissa T, the procrastination bully. You are in for a meaty episode today. Today, we are talking with Unique Dixon, who is a recovery mastery strategist. She is someone who has a lot of experience in the world of recovery. We're talking substance abuse, addiction recovery, and mental health recovery as well. So we nerd out today, y'all, in terms of mental health and addiction recovery. So this is a two-parter. So you'll see part one this week. Stay tuned for part two next week as well. But we get into some meaty stuff. As always, I always invite you when you're watching episodes of this show, bring your pen and paper. You be prepared to take notes in this episode, guys. This one will definitely bless you. Unique has a powerful story of recovery herself. She has overcome quite a lot. She has had multiple diagnoses and has overcome all of them and is a shining example of what's possible when you choose recovery, when you choose yourself, when you choose to prioritize yourself and to remind yourself that you are in fact a luxury item. So check out part one and be blessed. As you can see, and as promised, I have the beautiful Unique Dixon in the house. Welcome to the show, Unique. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So, as you guys heard me mention in the intro, Unique is a recovery mastery strategist. She coined that phrase. I had to make sure I got that right. Okay. But as of course, you guys heard me talk about May being Mental Health Awareness Month, I wanted to continue in that vein as it relates to procrastination. And Unique and I have had plenty of conversations about that. She has plenty of experience around it. So I wanted to bring her on so she can share her experience with you guys, not only as it relates to procrastination, but her experience in the recovery world as well, because she has a lot of experience with that. So, without further ado, Unique, just kind of let folks know a little bit more of who you are and all them letters behind your name, like what they mean, and
So
your journey.
So again, thank you for having me, sis. I really appreciate the opportunity, especially anything in regards to recovery. Like
Hmm.
I love recovery because it can seem so far fetched for a lot of us, depending on how far out you go. And some of us have went very, very far to where we felt hopeless. And I once I discovered recovery, I wanted to let everyone know that there is hope. And that leads me to me identifying my credentials. So I am what is called a certified peer specialist. And basically, what is that is a person that shares their lived experience with other people to get through any phase of development that they're in their recovery. The MH is for mental health. If you have maintained your recovery over a year, you can get certified by the state of Georgia through DBHDD and become a certified mental health peer specialist, which all of these letters included training. So they did provide us with a specific skill set. We are not clinicians, we are not counselors, we are just people just trying to keep it together one day at a time. And we just want to help some other people in recovery and just let them know that recovery is possible. And that leads me to the WH, which is Whole Health Action Management, which is basically taking a holistic approach to recovery from mind, body, and spirit.
Hmm.
And then lastly is AD. So I do have almost 8 years in substance use recovery. And I can go on and on about that. But in my recovery, I discovered that when I can remember when I first got into recovery, all I wanted to do was help people.
Mm.
And I wanted to be a nurse because that was the only thing that came to mind when help with helping people. However, as soon as I made that commitment, I saw a deer get hit by a car, and I said, "No, ma'am, I cannot be a nurse. I could not. I wanted to save the deer and couldn't save the deer, and I cried all the
Uh,
way home." So I later learned about this peer specialist opportunity. So throughout my early recovery, I didn't even have the recovery time to actually qualify, but I was committed to it. And I knew, like, without a shadow of a doubt, that this was an opportunity that I wanted to take because it would take me out of the space that I was in at
mm,
an early recovery. So it's been a very interesting journey. I've had the pleasure of facilitating groups with individuals within group homes, within transitional facilities that are just getting out of prison. I've worked directly with the crisis center. I've had the opportunity to work on the crisis line. I've spoke with individuals on the warm line to kind of walk them through, their day to day. Some people would call every day just to have someone to support them, and we would talk to them as if we never spoke to them before, which
wow.
that is, I mean, which was cool, but then they called every day. So,
Mm,
but I enjoyed my job, and I've also had the opportunity to facilitate a peer center group, peer center manage a peer center meeting where individuals would come and do outpatient services throughout the day. So basically from like 9 to 3, and we would just facilitate peer groups. So now in my current role, I provide individual services to to individuals that are seeking recovery now. And
wow.
I
Mhm.
also am a, forensic peer mentor, meaning if you have had any run-ins with the law, you
Mm.
can you can become a forensic peer mentor and help individuals that are transitioning out of institutions. In my case, by the grace of God, I don't have anything, severe, but in this process, all of my liabilities have become assets, every last one of them, which makes me qualified for each one of these letters that I've
I had to let that breathe because, like, the way you closed that out, that was a whole bar. All of
earned.
my liabilities have become assets, which now makes me qualified to do what I do. And I've earned every single letter that is behind my name. That was beautiful. That was beautiful. So, yeah, thank you. Thank you for breaking that down. Sometimes we see folks with credentials and we're like, what does that mean? Um, so you mentioned Atlanta, so kind of or Georgia. So talk about like have for our audience, let them know you're from Georgia, correct? Like born and raised kind of thing. You are a native.
Yes, I was born in Atlanta, Georgia. I grew up on the west side of Atlanta, Georgia. And if anyone knows anything about the west side, it's a lot of stuff going on. It's exactly what you hear in the rap songs. But fortunately for me, I was able to make it out. But yes, I was born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia.
So let's get into how you've earned those letters behind your name. Like whatever you're open to sharing with our audience, but talk about like some of those experiences that opened you up to say, you know what, like now that I've recovered, these are the people I want to help. Because you mentioned forensic, which that has to do with the law, and then peer. So anybody that's seeking recovery, you can talk to them and walk them through the process, but kind of share with our audience your personal recovery journey.
So, as stated, I grew up on the west side of Atlanta. Both of my parents were addicted to drugs, and I experienced a lot of dysfunction growing up, which led me to live a fast lifestyle. So, I pretty much got into a lot of stuff growing up. I was also in and out of institutions as a youth. I typically have like a collage of all my mugshots to share with my peers to let them know that there is a way out. Um, but being in all of those institutions and group homes and all of that stuff, and then experiencing, prostitution and drug addiction and dropping out of school and, just feeling completely helpless and not really having much purpose. I lost my mom at 14 years old. So um, I had kind of accepted that that was the way my life was going to be.
Mm,
And and was completely okay with it because it seemed like life was too hard. Initially, when I got into drugs, just like everyone else, it was recreational, it was fun, just something to do. But then it became a means of survival. And along with drug addiction, there were some mental health things going on, but I wasn't aware of them until I got into recovery. I felt
oh,
as though um, mental health was something that I didn't necessarily deal with, but there are a lot of things that we have experienced as individuals that we can't necessarily work through on our own. But
true.
you really won't really address it until you feel as though it's a problem. You won't really address what you're not willing to look at. So for years I
Right.
just didn't look at the trauma of losing my parents or the sexual abuse that I experienced as a youth. And so none of that stuff really mattered. And to be completely honest, I had become so desensitized. I had normalized a lot of those things. So I never felt like anything was wrong, including my drug addiction. And what led me to recovery, like I was actually on the brink of committing suicide, but I
Mm,
didn't have the courage to do it. So it just so happened there was an individual walking through the park, actually an older white gentleman, and and he asked me was I was okay, and I wasn't, and I was really hoping. I always share that I was really hoping it would be like Pretty Woman, like he would just take me in and pay all my bills and take care of everything for me because it was a difficult time, and a lot of
mm,
it was surrounded around finances. I was facing
mm,
7 years in prison, and I owed
oh,
my lawyer $1,700 at the time. My car note was due, everything was due, and I was just exhausted. And he mentioned like, "Hey, first of all, I don't have any money, but I know this place around the corner that could possibly help you." And it ended up being a 12-step meeting, and that was my introduction. But I felt like I was
nice.
too young
Mm-hmm.
to be in recovery because at that time I was in my early 20s and it just didn't necessarily seem attractive. But realistically, what I've learned as I've stayed in this process is the reason that when we walk into these 12-step fellowships that we don't see many people that look like us, young and in recovery, is because they're not staying. A lot of us feel as
Mm,
though we don't have a problem because the drugs that we use are socially acceptable. I figured, in order to be an addict, I had to be like my parents. I had to be smoking crack in an abandoned building, eating out of trash cans, and all of that stuff. But what I've come to understand is there's something inside of me that we all have. We all have an addictive personality to something, but some of us deal with obsession and compulsion on a whole nother level.
right.
And I began to address that over the years. And fortunate for me, I was able to surrender ultimately. And as stated, like I have almost 8 years. June 15th, 2016
That's
is
around the
my
corner.
recovery day. Yes. So, and I've always made that argument that I was too young to be in recovery, substance use recovery specifically.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as I went to my meeting and I surrendered, in less than 24 hours, I got a call that one of my friends who I would like to hang out in the club with, and dance with in the club, OD.
Oh,
So it was as if God told me that I always complain about being too young to recover, but He showed me that I wasn't too young to die. And so I began to do what I had to do as long as I wasn't causing harm to myself. As long as it was, I had to become open minded. It was a new journey. Of course, it went against everything that I had ever known, but these people were living this great life. They were smiling, they were happy, they were joyous and free, and I wanted some of that. So
ah,
it took a minute. It took a minute. It didn't mean that life didn't happen to them. They just developed principles and coping skills and tools, and have done, so much work on themselves that they know how to navigate through life's challenges, which is why, when I discovered that there was that type of freedom in recovery, I've been in it ever since, because I had a reality check. My parents didn't get this opportunity. They both died as a result of their addiction. So what I do is I honor my parents by living a life in recovery and helping other people discover recovery. So along with my credentials at the bottom, I'm currently studying for my social work degree at Georgia State University. So I'm about to have some more letters behind my name.
Word, word. I love it.
Yeah, because there's only so much impact I can make as a peer specialist, because I work with a lot of clinicians. So I can advocate and I can have these individual sessions, but in order to make impact, I have to become a clinician. Which, so wow, I'm doing the work now, And one thing I've learned in recovery is that we're all here for a purpose, and my purpose is to serve. We're all here to serve at different capacities.
Hmm.
However, I know that mine is to serve others, because I've always been very transparent about who I am. So I have no problem speaking out about my recovery journey in the hopes that it'll help someone else.
Wow. That, like, all of this is beautiful to hear. Like, I've heard, like, just so y'all know, Unique and I, like, we're super close. We talk every day, literally every day. When you guys hear me on these episodes and you hear me talking about the importance of accountability, Unique and I walk that out on a daily basis. We have a daily accountability call. So don't think we just spit in theory up here. Like, accountability is the cheat code as it relates to recovery. And as you guys heard me say in episode 31, like, if you're overcoming an addiction, like, the only way to do it is with accountability. You cannot do it on your own. You have to be able to connect with someone else, share what you're dealing with, and then, as you guys heard me say in episode 32, sometimes speaking to someone else can help you assign language to what you're going through that you may not have had before when you were trying to face it on your own. So, like, Unique and I, talk on a daily basis. But some of this I've heard in pieces. So I'm so appreciative that you're able to share it cohesively here, for our audience to glean from. So thank you so much for that.
First.
One of the things I wanted to present to you, this is something that I actually very recently heard. You and you've heard me mention Tim Ross pretty often, pretty recently. He just did a podcast. I don't know if it was, I think it's this past Monday, where he said he encountered, because like you, he's in the mental health space, not as a someone within the trade, but as a client. He's, been in therapy for 25 years plus, and he's doing EMDR therapy. And he said his EMDR therapist gave him a breakthrough like 6 months ago where he explained, like, the beginning of recovery is learning to regulate your nervous system. So, yes, the spiritual part is important. Yes, the emotional part is important, but it's regulating your nervous system that has to be the first step. Which is interesting because Tim is a former pastor. He was a pastor for, you know, almost 28 years now. And he thought that it was the spiritual part that was number one. And his counsel was like, I understand why you would make that assumption, but if that's the choice you make, you would fall every single time. He said, there's nothing that can overcome a deregulated nervous system. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that as it relates to your training and experience in recovery, and how, like, what are those coping mechanisms that people can use to help regulate themselves?
Absolutely. I had never heard it put that way, which is instrumental, because I was taught spirit. You
Hmm.
got to get your spirit right. You got to get your spirit right. But when I think about in regards to stepping outside of my personal recovery and working directly with clients, with my peers, they don't understand spirit. They don't
Mm-hmm.
understand that it even exists, because I didn't. I remember looking in the mirror and it was so dark in my eyes. I remember that. So to talk about being able to regulate your nervous system, we can be very impulsive,
Right.
fight or flight, specifically in regards to like our different attachment styles and things that remind us of what may have happened to us in the past. We typically react fight or flight.
Mm-hmm.
So I always tell my clients to practice some deep breathing, count to 10. Count. I remember when I first got into recovery, my mind it was just an endless loop. Like it just kept going, and I'll be trying to go to sleep and I cannot go to sleep. And what someone suggested was count from 100 backwards.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of helped me to just kind of, because the thing is, it's about shifting the focus,
Right. Right.
and that's what helps with the nerves. It's like, as long as I'm focus on this negative thing, it's probably going to drain me of all the positive energy that I have.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole idea is to redirect, and I still have to go through that sometimes because I deal with a lot of anxiety, which
Mm-hmm.
helped me to recognize my impulsive decisions that I've made. So that regulating your nerves and just taking a minute, like we have something in recovery that we call halt,
Mm-hmm.
and which is hungry, angry, lonely, or tired.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to look at that, like, when we caught up in these spaces and we're all, diseased and just all over the place, like, okay, like, and it's sometimes it's just as simple as you being hungry. You
Yeah.
might
Yes.
need to you might, like, because I mean, I expressed to you the pressure that I was under today, and I still took that few minutes to cook me an omelet, because I understood that if I did not eat, I was probably not going to be as friendly and bubbly on on this interview because I'm sitting here hungry,
Yeah.
So sometimes that's really what it is, and I think really it's just taking a pause, taking a beat, and learning to not be so reactive.
Right. Yeah. And that's a good point. And what's interesting is I actually learned the HALT acronym in the spiritual sense. Like I go to a church in Orlando called Grace Bible Church of Central Florida, and they like highlight the importance of Bible study and discipleship. And the late Dr. Charles Stanley teaches that. Like I think the Bible study course was how to like warfare against Satan or how to fight against Satan or something like that. And that he taught that acronym, that exact acronym, because he said, be mindful. If you are hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, that is when you are most susceptible to temptation and sin. And I was like, that's facts. And this ties in perfectly with what we're talking about with regulating the nervous system, because Tim's podcast was about 2 hours long. And there were a lot of people in the chat asking, okay, how do we regulate our nervous system? And the answer he gave was, you have to be specifically mindful about what your body is doing, because there is a difference. Oh, there you go. Mindfulness cards. I love that. That's awesome. So yeah, like you have to be, it's one thing to be open and transparent about how you're feeling emotionally and being able to put words to that, but you have to especially be mindful about what your body is doing. So I love that you brought up the HALT acronym, because that's one way, as a starting point for you who's watching. That's one way to develop a barometer for what to look for in your body in terms of, okay, what is my body doing? Why did I do that? Was I hungry? Am I tired? Like, am I feeling some type of way because I am lonely? You know what I mean? It's a great starting point. So thank you so much for bringing that up. Um, Talk about, like, if you could, like, share some of the coping mechanisms that people can use, especially if they deal with anxiety as you do, or to your point about behavior styles, if they're someone that has a very fast moving brain, because that is a thing, guys. Like, If you are watching and that's something you deal with, let me just free you up. There is nothing wrong with you. I want to open up with that. There's nothing wrong with you. You are wired to think quickly. The key now is to have the proper tools and coping mechanisms to harness the power of your very quick mind. You know what I mean? So kind of talk about that, Unique, like some of the tools and coping mechanisms that you were able to kind of harness that outside of the breathing exercises and counting.
So the first thing is, like I said earlier, is if I don't feel like there's a problem, then I
Mm-hmm.
won't address it. So first, I have to acknowledge what's going on and practice some self awareness. And like
Mm,
you said, looking at my body, looking at my identifying my emotions. I remember in early recovery, one of the first things someone introduced me to was a feeling chart because I was either mad or happy or sad.
yes. Yes.
So I being able to identify those emotions um, helped me to gauge the level of energy I want to give to things because sometimes I'm just a little disappointed or I'm feeling
Mm,
discouraged or I'm feeling, and it's not really just mad or happy or sad. Like it just doesn't have to go from 0 to 100, So I believe the first thing would be identifying your feeling and having that self awareness about yourself. Also, I can say similar to the accountability buddy, it makes it a lot easier when you can go through these things with someone.
yeah.
Someone that and not just someone um but someone who can identify, someone that's probably in the process with you. I believe, I truly know the only reason I am sitting here is because of the fellowship I have found in the 12-step program to support
Mm-hmm.
me along my journey, where I can go in and I can talk about all of the crazy stuff I'm going through, and someone that has had experience with it can support me and share their experience with me and give me a different perspective, because my perspective is limited in most cases,
Mm-hmm.
especially when it's emotion driven. So I believe
Mm-hmm.
finding fellowship, whether that's church, whether it's 12-step fellowship, whether it's, peer groups, whatever kind of support you can get, even that warm line, like those individuals that called that warm line on a consistent basis, it was because they needed that human connection. And it was because they needed somebody to identify with them and create space for them and would actually listen to them. So that's another thing, having that human connection and finding that support. Also, seeking professional help. I actually did not
Mm.
embrace my professional recovery. I mean, the hit is I had all of those letters at the time that I, was seeking recovery. I was
Wow.
telling people like, hey, take your medication, and hey, address your mental health. And I'm a mental health advocate and all of this stuff. And I just kept it because my substance use was the most obvious thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I kind of set my focus. But as I progressed, and I would say around like maybe around about 6 years in, so this is
Mm-hmm.
still new. I'm literally currently still taking medication so I could figure out what's working for me. Um, but I remember experiencing a moment of clarity. Maybe I should seek professional help to kind of help me address these symptoms that I'm experiencing, because as I'm working in this field, I see people. So I see symptoms, I see things. So I started
Mm.
being able to connect to some of those things. It wasn't just, depression. I actually have major depressive disorder along with anxiety and ADHD.
Wow.
ADHD was my diagnosis at 16, and I took one pill and didn't like how it made me feel, only to fast forward now 20 years later and I'm taking the same pill, and it's working great. It's working.
Ah.
I think it was really just the circumstances at that time, and I really wasn't able to receive help. My
Right.
spirit wasn't ready to receive the help along with, I was rebellious. I had just lost my mom. I was in an institution. Actually, I was in an institution for a year at the age of 15. So that's where they gave me my diagnosis, and I kind of buried my mental health. So a lot of people have had traumatic experiences as a youth, um, in regards to mental health. So as they've aged and made it this far in life, it's kind of like, oh, I'm good. It's something that they've kind of just thrown by the wayside. But again, you won't address what you're not willing to look at. So that professional help has been a game changer. I also get therapy every 2 weeks, and that has been instrumental because although I'm taking my medication, I experienced an episode where I panicked because I was like, oh my God, I'm not going to have my medication because I missed my appointment. And my therapist taught me a simple thing: just trust in your abilities. You've already
Mm.
put systems in place. So just follow those same systems as if you would with your medication. And that has been instrumental to where I don't take my medication every day and I still get things done. So it's about management. It's about being open minded, to what people suggest. There has been a negative, a negative connotation what comes with mental health. So a lot of people don't want to address it. So that again, getting that professional help, having that support group or that fellowship with someone that can identify, and self-awareness. And also I go to the gym. I try not to eat sugary stuff. I try to do quite a few things to kind of manage my mental health. But those are the key things that I've done. And also going inside, looking through those things that's inside of you, because there's a lot of stuff, as I've discovered on this recovery journey, there's a lot of stuff that's stored off in us. And sometimes it takes
Yes.
a situation, and that's exactly why we respond, the way that we do sometimes. And I had a situation where, a guy got in my face and, you know, um, because I was trying to tell him to leave the young lady alone, and I told my therapist, he got in my face and I sat back and I was cussing and acting crazy. And the one thing about therapy, I'm gonna give you a pure example of what therapy is. My therapist helped me identify why that triggered me so much. And the reason that
Mm.
triggered me so much was because no one was there to protect me when I was new and when I was young.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that was like the furthest thing from my mind, but that's why professional help has been
Yep.
a game changer.
Yeah. And thank
Yeah.
you for sharing that. That's a powerful example. Yeah. And again, to what I said earlier, like someone from the outside can assign words to what you've been experiencing on a visceral level. Like you've just been experiencing it, but once you hear a word that you can assign to it, as Mignon says, once you can name something, you have dominion over it. I've been sharing that, with our audience. So, thank you for that. Didn't I tell you that was a meaty episode? So, hopefully you guys took a lot of notes from this conversation. And as promised, part two will come to you next week. We're rounding out May as Mental Health Awareness Month, so you guys are getting a bit of a bonus heading into June, with part two. But wanted to make sure to bring someone like Unique onto the show to talk about those specific details to give you language in the event that you need it for whatever the case may be that may be causing you to procrastinate. In some cases, it may be emotional. Some cases, it might be substantive. You never know. Um, go over the different options that she shared that are available to you, and by all means, use them. If you have any questions for me or you need me to point you in a particular direction, by all means, drop your comments below. Unique will be in the comments section as well. So if you have questions for her, drop your questions for her in the comments as well. But in the meantime, if you haven't subscribed yet, be sure to do that. Like, share, subscribe, all of that fun stuff. You can subscribe on YouTube at Getting the Win. You can follow me on Instagram, Pinterest, and Threads at Getting the Win Show. I will catch you next week. Remember to continue to work on your hashtag luxury item, whatever that thing is that you have been procrastinating on. Be sure to pick it back up or continue to work on it. If you've been rocking with me for a while now and you're working on it, continue to do so. I'm so proud of those of you who've been reaching out to me in the community, on social media, about what you've been working on and sharing your wins. It's awesome to see you get the win. You know, we are goal getters out here. We are luxury items out here. So it's important for you to know that and continue to remember that as we head into this next week. But much love. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday and the rest of your week. Peace out. Beat procrastination with an attitude. Go to gettingthewingear.com. We've got shirts that deliver that message of your strong focus and dedication to your hashtag luxury item, because your goal is super important. You are super important, and it's important that the world knows that you know that. Give them the message of focus, of self-work, of self-improvement, and empowerment. Go to gettingthewingear.com. Check out the shirts, sweats, mugs, bags if you need it, and give yourself that reminder, give the world that reminder that you are indeed a goal getter. You are indeed a winner.